Welcome to Cozy Sleep Media. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to be, nothing to finish, nothing to solve, nothing waiting for your attention. The busy hours of the day are behind you now, and the quiet hours of night are beginning. Allow yourself to settle comfortably where you are. Notice the gentle support beneath your body. There is nothing you need to adjust, nothing you need to hold, nothing you need to control. Simply allow yourself to rest here. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Hold it softly for just a moment, and slowly breathe out. Again, a calm breath in, and a peaceful breath out. Let your shoulders become a little softer. Let your hands rest wherever they feel comfortable. Allow your jaw to loosen gently. There is no need to think about tomorrow. There is no need to revisit today. Whatever happened can remain where it happened. For now, you can simply rest. Imagine the quiet beginning around you. The world outside is still growing. The streets are becoming empty. The distant lights are slowly disappearing, and somewhere beyond the quiet countryside, winter snow is falling softly. Each snowflake drifts without hurry. Each one settles gently upon the earth. The fields are becoming white and peaceful. The old trees stand quietly beneath them. A cold winter wind moves through branches, but you are somewhere warm and sheltered. Somewhere a fire is burning nearby. Somewhere warm light fills an old wooden room. And tonight, you are going there. Imagine yourself walking along a country road. The evening sky is deep blue above you. Soft snow falls around your footsteps. The road stretches gently through the countryside. There is no need to walk quickly. There is nowhere else you need to reach. Ahead, a warm golden light appears. It shines beyond the snowy trees. And beside that quiet road, an old country inn is waiting. Its windows glow softly against winter darkness. Its wooden door is warm beneath your hand. Inside, a fire is already burning. A comfortable room is waiting upstairs. And for tonight, you can leave the outside world behind. So take another slow breath in and gently breathe out. Let yourself become a little more relaxed. Let the winter night become quieter around you. And when you are ready, we will begin our peaceful journey to the old country inn. The evening was settling over the countryside. Snow covered the narrow road ahead. The traveler walked beneath the fading winter light. His footsteps disappeared into fresh powder. Bare branches stretched above the quiet hedgerows. Small snowflakes landed upon his dark coat. The air felt cold against his cheeks. Yet the evening seemed strangely peaceful. There was no reason to hurry tonight. The village waited somewhere beyond the fields. He continued along the winding country road. His leather suitcase rested beside his leg. Its handle felt cold beneath his glove. He adjusted his scarf against the wind, then continued toward the distant village. The countryside seemed almost completely empty. Only a few farmhouses remained visible. Their chimneys released thin trails of smoke. The smoke drifted slowly across the fields, then disappeared into the evening sky. A wooden fence followed the road quietly. Snow rested along each weathered post. Beyond it, frozen fields stretched outward. Their white surfaces reflected the fading light. Far away, a church bell sounded. One gentle note crossed the countryside. Then another followed through the silence. The traveler paused beside the roadside. He listened for several quiet moments. Nothing answered the distant bell. Only the winter wind moved softly. He looked toward the darkening horizon. A faint glow appeared beyond some trees. Perhaps it came from the village. Perhaps from a house beside it. Either way, warmth could not be far. He lifted his suitcase once more, then continued along the snowy road. The evening became darker around him. The first stars appeared above the fields. Snow continued falling without making a sound. Soon, the village lights became clearer, and one warm window stood ahead. It seemed to welcome him forward. The road finally reached the village edge. Several small cottages stood nearby. Their rooftops carried thick layers of snow. Warm lamps glowed behind frosted windows. A bakery stood beside the village square. Its wooden shutters were already closed. A small lantern hung above its doorway. Across the square stood an old clock tower. Its stone walls looked pale beneath snow. The traveler slowed beside the village fountain. Ice covered its shallow basin completely. A few footprints crossed the nearby square. They belonged to villagers returning home. Most doors were already closed for the evening. Only one shop remained softly illuminated. A bookseller stood inside its window. He was arranging several old books. The traveler watched from across the street. Then the bookseller lowered the curtain. The warm light disappeared behind it. The village became quieter almost immediately. A horse moved slowly along the far street. Its harness made a gentle metallic sound. The sound faded beyond the cottages. The traveler continued toward the village inn. A wooden sign appeared beyond the square. It hung beneath an old stone building. The painted letters read, "Country Inn." Snow rested across the top of the sign. A brass lantern burned beneath it. Its golden light touched the snowy ground. The traveler stopped for a quiet moment. He looked at the building carefully. It seemed older than the surrounding cottages. Dark timber crossed its pale stone walls. Several windows glowed warmly upstairs. A chimney rose above the steep roof. Smoke curled gently into the darkening sky. This was clearly the place. The traveler crossed the snowy street. His boots touched the wooden porch. Snow slipped quietly from his shoulders. He placed his suitcase beside the doorway. Warm light shone through the glass. He reached toward the old brass handle. Then I opened the door slowly. A gentle warmth welcomed him inside. The entrance hall felt wonderfully warm. A large fireplace stood against one wall. Several logs burned behind an iron grate. Soft flames moved across the stone hearth. A grandfather clock stood beside the staircase. Its pendulum moved steadily from side to side. The traveler removed his heavy winter coat. He placed it upon an old wooden peg, then removed his snow-covered gloves. Warmth slowly returned to his fingers. The room smelled faintly of cedar wood. There was also a hint of fresh bread. Somewhere nearby, supper was being prepared. A quiet voice came from the hallway. An elderly innkeeper soon appeared there. He wore a dark woolen vest. His silver hair was neatly combed back. He greeted the traveler with gentle warmth. The traveler explained his need for lodging. The innkeeper smiled and nodded quietly. A room had already been prepared upstairs. He reached for the traveler's suitcase. The traveler thanked him and followed. They walked across the polished wooden floor. Their footsteps sounded soft against the boards. The staircase rose beside the fireplace. Several framed photographs covered its walls. Some showed the village during summer. Others showed the inn many years earlier. There were horses beside the front entrance. There were families gathered beneath umbrellas. There were travelers standing beside old carriages. The photographs seemed peaceful and timeless. The innkeeper climbed slowly toward the upper floor. The traveler followed without speaking. At the landing, they reached a wooden door. The innkeeper opened it with care. Warm candlelight filled the small bedroom. A narrow bed stood beneath the window. A thick quilt covered its wooden frame. A comfortable chair waited beside the hearth. A small writing desk stood near the wall. The room felt quiet and pleasantly private. The innkeeper placed the suitcase beside the bed. Then he wished the traveler good evening. His footsteps slowly disappeared downstairs. The traveler remained alone inside the room. For the first time that evening, he felt completely at ease. The traveler looked around his quiet room. Everything had been arranged with simple care. A brass lamp rested beside the bed. A small candle burned upon the desk. The fireplace gave gentle warmth nearby. Fresh logs waited inside a wooden basket. A folded wool blanket rested upon the chair. The traveler removed his shoes slowly. He placed them beside the hearth. Their damp leather began drying in warmth. Then he opened his small suitcase. He removed a clean woolen sweater. His book followed from beneath the clothes. He placed it beside the candle. There was no need to unpack anything else. Tonight would be simple and quiet. He walked toward the bedroom window. The glass was covered with delicate frost. He cleared a small circle with his hand. The village appeared beneath the evening darkness. Several windows still glowed below. A lantern moved slowly along the street. Someone was carrying it home. A door opened across the square. Warm light spilled briefly outside. Then the door closed once again. The traveler watched the village becoming quieter. One by one, the remaining lights disappeared. The clock tower showed the approaching hour. Its face looked pale beneath the moonlight. A few snowflakes crossed the window. They disappeared against the dark glass. The traveler stepped away from the window. He returned to the comfortable chair. His book rested quietly in his hands. The first pages turned beneath his fingers. The fireplace crackled softly beside him. He read without thinking about the time. The room required nothing from him. The village required nothing either. For tonight, he could simply rest. Outside, winter continued its slow work. Inside, the old room remained warm, and somewhere below, supper was being served. After some time, the traveler closed his book. He decided to join the evening supper. The staircase carried him downstairs quietly. Warm light filled the dining room below. Several old lanterns hung above the tables. Their golden glow touched the wooden walls. Only a few guests remained for supper. They spoke in calm, quiet voices. The traveler chose a table near the hearth. A server soon brought him a warm meal. Steam rose gently from the vegetable soup. Fresh bread rested beside the bowl. There were potatoes with roasted winter vegetables. A small dish of butter sat nearby. The traveler began eating slowly. The food tasted simple and comforting. Outside, snow continued covering the village. The windows reflected the dining room's warm light. Beyond the glass, everything looked wonderfully still. A clock ticked above the fireplace. Its quiet rhythm filled the spaces between voices. Occasionally, someone placed down a cup. Then the room became quiet again. The traveler finished his soup slowly. He enjoyed the warmth spreading through him. A cup of tea arrived afterward. Steam curled gently above its surface. He held the cup between both hands. The warmth felt pleasant against his fingers. For several minutes, he simply watched the fire. The flames moved behind the iron grate. Their light shifted across the dining room. The innkeeper walked quietly between tables. He checked that everyone had enough. The remaining guests gradually finished their meals. One guest rose and left quietly. Another disappeared toward the sitting room. Soon, only 2 tables remained occupied. The traveler finished his tea. He looked toward the windows once more. Snow covered the village completely now. The night had become beautifully still. He thanked the innkeeper for the supper, then slowly left the dining room. The staircase waited beneath warm golden light. He began climbing toward his room. The olden remained peaceful behind him, and the winter night continued outside. The traveler returned from the dining room. Instead of going upstairs immediately, he noticed a softly lit room nearby. Its wooden door stood slightly open. Warm light escaped through the narrow opening. He stepped inside without making a sound. The sitting room was comfortably furnished. Several armchairs surrounded a low wooden table. A bookcase covered almost an entire wall. Old books filled its wooden shelves. Some bindings were faded from many years. Others still carried their original gold lettering. A small fire burned inside another hearth. Its warmth reached across the quiet room. Beside the fireplace stood a reading lamp. Its amber light illuminated an open newspaper. The traveler chose a comfortable armchair. He settled into the deep cushions slowly. For a while, he simply listened. The fire made quiet sounds nearby. The old clock continued marking the minutes. Occasionally, wind touched the window glass. The sound remained soft and distant. The traveler looked toward the bookshelves. One particular shelf caught his attention. It contained several old travel journals. He reached for a small leather-bound volume. Dust rested lightly upon its cover. He opened the book with careful fingers. Inside were handwritten descriptions of distant places. There were mountain villages and coastal towns. There were sketches of old railway stations. There were notes about long winter journeys. The traveler read several pages quietly. The handwriting belonged to another generation, yet the words felt strangely familiar. He imagined those earlier travelers arriving here. Perhaps they had sat beside this fireplace. Perhaps they had watched the same winter evenings. The thought made the old room feel warmer. He closed the journal gently, then returned it to its shelf. Outside, the wind became slightly stronger. The window panes gave a soft rattle. The traveler remained comfortably seated. There was still no reason to hurry. The night seemed to have plenty of time. After some time, the traveler left the sitting room. He walked slowly through the quiet hallway. Several doors opened toward different parts of the inn. One led toward the dining room. Another opened into a small library. At the far end stood an old staircase. It led toward the upper rooms. The traveler paused beside several framed paintings. They showed the surrounding countryside. One painting displayed the village during winter. Snow covered the same rooftops below. The artist had painted the clock tower carefully. Even the old stone fountain was visible. Another painting showed the village in spring. Green fields surrounded the cottages. The traveler studied both paintings quietly. The changing seasons seemed captured together. He continued walking toward the small library. The door opened with almost no sound. Inside, several shelves filled the walls. A wooden desk stood beneath a narrow window. A green-shaded lamp rested upon it. Several letters were arranged beside the lamp. They appeared carefully preserved beneath glass. The traveler did not touch them. Instead, he looked around the peaceful room. A small globe stood upon the desk. Its surface showed an older world. Several countries carried different names. The traveler slowly turned the globe. Its wooden base made a gentle sound. Then he stopped it with one finger. The room remained completely silent. He looked toward the window. Snow covered the narrow garden outside. A small stone path disappeared beneath it. Beyond the garden stood several bare trees. Their branches moved gently in the wind. The traveler remained there for a while. He enjoyed the peacefulness of the library. Eventually, he closed the door behind him. The hallway seemed quieter than before. Only the grandfather clock remained audible. Its steady ticking followed him upstairs. Back inside his bedroom, the traveler found a small tray waiting. A pot of freshly prepared tea stood there. Beside it was a small plate of biscuits. Someone had quietly brought them upstairs. He placed the tray beside the window, then sat down in the nearby chair. The candle beside him burned steadily. Its flame moved whenever the air shifted. He poured the tea into a porcelain cup. Steam rose slowly from the surface. The scent was warm and gently fragrant. He took a careful sip. The tea tasted mild and comforting. Outside, the snowfall had become quieter. The village below was almost completely dark. Only a few windows remained illuminated. One belonged to the village innkeeper. Another belonged to a cottage nearby. A distant lantern moved along the road, then disappeared behind a row of houses. The traveler watched the darkness settle. The world outside seemed farther away now. He broke one biscuit into 2 pieces, then ate it slowly with his tea. There was something peaceful about the simplicity. Warm tea, soft candlelight, a quiet winter evening. Nothing more was needed. The traveler leaned back in his chair. He listened to the small sounds around him. The fire shifted inside the hearth. The clock downstairs marked another minute. The wind moved gently against the roof. The sounds blended into a soft rhythm. He finished the last sip of tea, then placed the cup carefully down. The room had become pleasantly warm. His eyes felt slightly heavier now, but he still wanted to read. So he reached toward his book. The candle continued burning beside him, and the winter night slowly deepened. A little later, the traveler decided to step outside. He wanted a brief breath of winter air. He wrapped himself inside his warm wool coat, then carried a small lantern downstairs. The innkeeper noticed him near the entrance. He simply smiled and opened the door. The traveler stepped onto the snowy porch. Cold air touched his face immediately. The courtyard stretched quietly behind the inn. Fresh snow covered the wooden fence. A small stable stood beyond it. Its roof carried a smooth layer of white. Several footprints crossed the courtyard. They belonged to the inn's horses. The traveler walked slowly toward the stable. A gentle warmth escaped beneath its wooden door. Inside, 2 horses rested quietly. Their breath appeared softly in the cold air. The traveler stopped a short distance away. He did not disturb them. One horse lifted its head briefly, then returned to its quiet rest. A lantern hung from the stable wall. Its warm light touched the wooden beams. The traveler stood there for several moments. He listened to the horses shifting gently. The sounds were calm and unhurried. Beyond the stable stood a small garden. Winter had covered everything in white. A stone bench rested beneath the snow. Bare rose bushes surrounded its edges. The traveler walked toward the garden gate. He looked across the quiet courtyard. From here, the inn appeared especially peaceful. Warm windows glowed against the snowy darkness. Smoke rose slowly from the chimney. The sight made him feel comfortably sheltered. He remained outside a little longer. Then the cold began reaching through his coat. It was time to return indoors. He walked back toward the porch. The lantern beside the door welcomed him. He opened it and stepped inside. Warmth surrounded him once again. The winter air remained safely outside. The traveler returned to his bedroom. He removed his heavy coat carefully, then hung it beside the wooden door. The room felt warmer than before. The fireplace had settled into glowing embers. A few small flames still moved between the logs. He added one fresh piece of firewood. The flames slowly grew brighter. He watched until the wood caught properly. Then he prepared himself for bed. His book rested quietly upon the bedside table. The candle had burned lower than before. He extinguished it with a gentle breath. Only the fireplace remained. Its warm glow filled the room softly. The traveler folded his clothes beside the chair, then placed his watch upon the table. There was no alarm needed for morning. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight belonged entirely to rest. He opened the curtains slightly. Snow still covered the rooftops below. The village appeared almost completely asleep. No lanterns moved along the roads. No doors opened beneath the snowy roofs. Even the clock tower seemed quieter now. The traveler closed the curtains again. He turned toward the waiting bed. The thick quilt looked warm and inviting. He slipped beneath the blanket slowly. The mattress settled gently beneath him. The warmth surrounded his tired body. For several moments, he simply rested. The fireplace continued burning nearby. Its soft crackling filled the quiet room. He listened without trying to understand anything. The sounds required no attention. They simply existed around him. His breathing gradually became slower. His thoughts became softer. The long journey already felt far away. The snowy road belonged to earlier hours. The village had become peaceful and still, and inside the old country inn, the traveler finally began drifting toward sleep. The traveler left his bedroom quietly. The hallway was almost completely silent. Only one lamp remained burning nearby. He remembered the small library downstairs. Its wooden door waited beyond the staircase. He walked down slowly and carefully. The floorboards whispered beneath his footsteps. The library door opened without resistance. Warm darkness surrounded the room. A single lamp illuminated the writing desk. Tall bookshelves covered the surrounding walls. Their wooden surfaces carried years of age. Several books stood unevenly upon shelves. Others were arranged with careful precision. The traveler walked slowly between them. His fingers brushed across worn leather bindings. Some titles were difficult to read. Their letters had faded over time. A small reading table stood beside the window. Two wooden chairs waited beside it. The traveler chose the nearer chair. He sat beneath the quiet lamp. Outside, snow moved across the glass. The snowfall looked almost weightless tonight. He turned toward the nearest bookshelf. One narrow volume caught his attention. Its cover was dark green leather. A small brass clasp held it closed. He carefully opened the clasp. The pages smelled faintly of old paper. Several handwritten notes filled the first pages. The writing was neat and delicate. An unfamiliar name appeared above the first entry. Below it was an old winter date. The traveler began reading quietly. The first words described a journey. The journey had ended at this inn. The traveler continued turning the pages. Each entry carried another winter memory. Some mentioned snow-covered roads. Others described long evenings beside fireplaces. One entry described this same library. The traveler looked around with quiet wonder. The room suddenly felt much older. He continued reading beneath the lamp. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, the old journal waited patiently. The journal belonged to a former traveler. His name appeared throughout the pages. He had visited the inn many times, usually during the coldest winter months. His entries described quiet journeys. He wrote about horses and distant railways. He mentioned villages hidden beneath snow. He described evenings spent without clocks. The traveler read slowly through several pages. One entry described a particularly cold winter. The roads had completely disappeared beneath snow. Travelers had remained inside for days. The inn had welcomed everyone warmly. The journal mentioned the old dining room. It described long tables beside the hearth. The traveler remembered that room clearly. He continued reading the handwritten account. Another entry described the village church. Another mentioned the small winter market. The details connected familiar places together. The traveler realized something unexpected. This village had changed very little. Many buildings remained exactly where described. The old inn had survived every winter. The journal became more personal afterward. The writer described feeling peaceful here. He wrote about leaving busy cities behind. He enjoyed the village's slower rhythm. He often stayed longer than planned. The traveler understood that feeling completely. He turned another page carefully. A pressed flower rested between two pages. It had become completely dry with age. A small note accompanied the flower. The note mentioned a winter evening. It described watching snow beside this window. The traveler glanced toward the library window. Snow was still falling outside. For a moment, past and present overlapped. He closed the journal gently. The room seemed even quieter now. He placed the book upon the table, then remained seated beside it. The old story had ended, but the night continued around him. The innkeeper appeared at the doorway. He noticed the open journal. A gentle smile crossed his face. He recognized the old leather cover. The traveler asked about its former owner. The innkeeper stepped quietly inside. He pulled another chair beside the table. That journal had belonged to a regular guest. The guest had visited for many winters. He always requested the same room. It was the room beside the old library. The traveler listened with quiet interest. The innkeeper continued his story slowly. Years ago, travelers arrived by horse. The railway station stood several miles away. The inn provided horses for distant journeys. Travelers often rested here overnight. Some stayed only a single evening. Others remained throughout harsh winters. The innkeeper pointed toward an old photograph. It showed the building many years earlier. The roof looked different in that photograph. The windows were smaller as well, yet the front entrance remained unchanged. The traveler studied the photograph carefully. Another picture showed the old stable. Several horses stood beside its doorway. The innkeeper explained their importance. Those horses carried guests across winter roads. They were considered part of the inn. The traveler imagined those earlier journeys. Snowy roads had once taken days. There were no bright electric signs. No busy highways crossed the countryside. Travelers depended upon warm places like this. The innkeeper closed the photograph album. He returned it to its shelf. Then he looked toward the old journal. Many stories remained inside those pages. The traveler understood why they were preserved. They connected strangers across different winters. The innkeeper wished him a peaceful night. Then he quietly left the library. The traveler remained beside the old journal. For a while, he said nothing. The room felt full of distant memories. Eventually, he closed the journal completely, then stood from his chair. The traveler returned toward the staircase. The inn had grown quieter than before. Most lamps had already been lowered. Only small pools of light remained. He climbed the stairs without hurry. The wooden railing felt smooth beneath his hand. At the upper landing, he stopped. A narrow corridor stretched ahead. Several bedroom doors stood along both sides. Behind them, guests were already sleeping. No voices came through the doors. No footsteps disturbed the hallway. The traveler walked slowly toward the far end. There was a small window there. It overlooked the snowy courtyard. Moonlight rested across the white ground. A lantern still burned beside the stable. Its glow appeared small from above. The traveler watched it quietly. Snowflakes crossed the moonlit courtyard. They seemed to disappear before reaching ground. He remained beside the window briefly, then noticed another door nearby. A small brass plaque hung upon it. The plaque carried an old painted number. The traveler remembered the innkeeper's story. This had once been the regular guest's room. The door remained closed tonight. He did not disturb it. Instead, he looked at the handle. Its brass surface had darkened with age. He wondered how many hands had touched it. How many winter evenings had passed here? Then he continued toward his own room. The corridor seemed longer at night. His footsteps made almost no sound. The Olden felt completely asleep. At his bedroom door, he paused. The key turned gently inside the lock. He opened the door without noise. Warm darkness waited inside. The fire still glowed beside the bed. He stepped into the room quietly, then closed the door behind him. The traveler returned to his chair. The old journal remains downstairs now, but its story stayed in his thoughts. He opened his book again. Only a few pages remained unread. The room was quieter than before. The fire had settled into glowing embers. A small flame moved between the logs. The traveler read beneath the candlelight. Outside, snow continued falling. The village had become completely still. No footsteps crossed the street anymore. No lanterns moved through the darkness. The distant church remained silent. Even the winter wind had softened. The traveler turned another page. His eyes slowly became heavier. He reached the final page, then closed the book gently. He placed it beside the candle. For a moment, he sat without moving. The room felt peaceful and complete. There was nothing left to accomplish, nothing waiting beyond the bedroom door. The traveler looked toward the fireplace. Its warmth remained steady. He stood and checked the window. The latch was securely closed. The curtains were drawn across the glass. He lowered the candle flame slightly. The room became softer and darker. Only the fireplace illuminated the walls. He changed into his night clothes, then folded his clothes beside the chair. His watch rested quietly upon the table. There was no reason to check it. Time no longer seemed important. He slipped beneath the thick blankets. The mattress welcomed his tired body. He adjusted the pillow beneath his head, then settled comfortably into the warmth. The fireplace made one soft crackling sound. The traveler closed his eyes slowly. Outside, winter continued without a hurry. Inside, the old country remained still. The night had become wonderfully quiet, and soon sleep would arrive naturally. The traveler rested beneath warm blankets, yet sleep had not arrived completely. His eyes opened after several quiet minutes. The room remained dark and peaceful. The fireplace still gave gentle warmth. He listened to the silence around him. Then he heard something downstairs. A faint wooden sound reached his room. Perhaps someone was closing a door. The traveler sat up slowly. He slipped into his warm dressing gown, then opened his bedroom door carefully. The upstairs hallway remained completely empty. A small lamp glowed near the staircase. He walked downstairs without making noise. The common room looked different tonight. Only one lamp remained above the fireplace. Several chairs stood empty nearby. A folded newspaper rested upon one table. A half-finished cup sat beside it. Someone had clearly left moments earlier. The traveler walked toward the large window. Darkness covered the village outside. No movement appeared beyond the glass. He turned toward the fireplace instead. The remaining guests had gone upstairs. The innkeeper was nowhere in sight. The entire common room felt abandoned. Yet it did not feel lonely. It felt peacefully finished for tonight. The traveler chose a chair beside the wall. He listened to the old building, which shifted somewhere beneath the roof. A gentle creak traveled through the floor. The sound soon disappeared completely. He looked toward the empty tables. Everything seemed ready for the morning, but morning was still far away. Tonight still belonged to winter darkness. The traveler remained there quietly. He allowed the silence to surround him. Then footsteps sounded from the hallway. The innkeeper appeared carrying a lantern. He nodded when he saw the traveler. There was no need for conversation. They simply shared the quiet room. The innkeeper walked toward the fireplace. He examined the remaining logs carefully, then moved one piece with iron tongs. The embers shifted beneath the ash. A small flame appeared once again. The innkeeper checked the room quietly. He straightened several chairs near the wall, then collected the empty cups. He carried them toward the kitchen. The traveler watched from his chair. Everything happened slowly and naturally. There was no hurry anywhere. The innkeeper returned with a small basket. Inside were several pieces of firewood. He placed them beside the hearth. Then I checked the nearby windows. Each latch was secured for night. The traveler noticed his careful routine. Every evening had its own small rituals. The innkeeper lowered one remaining lamp. The common room became slightly darker. He checked the front entrance afterward. The heavy wooden door was firmly locked. A metal latch held it securely. He tested it once with care, then placed the key into his pocket. The innkeeper walked toward the staircase. He paused beside an old wall clock. Its hands showed a late hour. He adjusted the clock's winding mechanism. A quiet clicking sound filled the hallway. Then everything became silent again. The traveler rose from his chair. He thanked the innkeeper for everything. The innkeeper smiled warmly in return. He wished the traveler a restful night, then disappeared toward his private quarters. The traveler remained downstairs briefly. The inn had entered its final quiet hours. He looked around the common room. Nothing remains unfinished now. The lamps were dim. The doors were locked. The fire was safely burning. The entire inn seemed ready for sleep. The traveler slowly walked toward the entrance, then opened the inner porch door. Cold winter air waited beyond. The traveler stepped onto the covered porch. The night air felt crisp against his face. Snow covered the wooden steps completely. A lantern burned beside the doorway. Its flame moved gently behind the glass. The traveler stood beneath its warm glow. Beyond the porch, darkness covered everything. The village looked completely different tonight. The familiar square had disappeared into shadow. Only snow revealed its shape. The traveler walked toward the courtyard. His boots pressed gently into fresh powder. No footprints crossed this area yet. The snow felt untouched beneath his feet. He stopped beside the wooden gate. Beyond it stood the sleeping stable. A faint warmth escaped beneath its door. The horses were resting inside. No sounds came from within. The traveler looked toward the roof. Snow covered its entire surface. A thin line of smoke rose above it. The smoke disappeared into the dark sky. He turned toward the surrounding cottages. Every window appeared dark now. The village had finally gone to sleep. Not even a distant cart moved. The silence felt deeper than earlier. The traveler breathed slowly in the cold. The air smelled clean and faintly earthy. He looked upward toward the night sky. Clouds covered most of the stars, yet several bright points remained visible. They appeared between the drifting clouds. Snowflakes crossed his view slowly. Each one caught the lantern's light. For a moment, they seemed to sparkle. The traveler remained outside, a little longer. There was something comforting about this stillness. He did not need to understand it. He simply allowed himself to experience it. Then the cold reached through his gown. He turned toward the warm doorway. The lantern welcomed him back. He stepped inside once again. Warmth slowly returned to his hands. The winter night remained outside. The traveler returned toward the staircase. He paused before climbing the steps. A deep sound suddenly crossed the village. The old church bell had begun ringing. One slow note filled the darkness. Then another followed after several seconds. The traveler counted quietly in his mind. The hour was approaching midnight. The final bell faded across the rooftops. Silence returned almost immediately. He stood beneath the staircase lamp. The sound had traveled remarkably far. Even inside the inn, it remained clear. He wondered how many villagers heard it. Perhaps someone was still awake. Perhaps everyone else was sleeping. The thought made the village feel peaceful. He continued climbing toward his room. The upstairs hallway seemed darker now. Only one lamp remained near his door. Its small flame barely moved. The traveler walked slowly across the floor. He noticed how quiet everything had become. Even the wooden boards seemed asleep. Behind every door, someone rested peacefully. The traveler reached his bedroom. He opened the door and entered. The fireplace had burned lower now. Only several glowing logs remained. The room felt pleasantly warm. He added one small piece of wood. The embers slowly brightened again. A soft flame appeared between the logs. The traveler sat beside the hearth. He listened to the final echoes outside. The church bell had disappeared completely. Nothing replaced its distant sound. The winter night seemed endless now. He looked toward the closed curtains. Snow continued falling beyond them. He imagined the village beneath white rooftops. Everything was quiet beneath the darkness. He remained beside the fire. His breathing became slower and calmer. His eyelids felt increasingly heavy. He knew the night was progressing. Soon, he would return beneath the blankets. For now, he simply rested beside warmth. The traveler finally stood from his chair. The room had become completely peaceful. The fireplace gave a soft amber glow. He checked the fire one final time. The remaining logs were burning safely. He moved the chair closer to bed, then placed his book upon it. There would be no more reading tonight. He turned toward the bedside table. His watch remained exactly where he left it. He looked at the time briefly, then turned the watch face downward. There was no need to measure the night. He wanted only to rest. The traveler extinguished the remaining candle. Darkness gently filled the bedroom. The fireplace became the only light. Its glow moved across the ceiling. The shadows shifted with every flame. The traveler climbed into bed slowly. The blankets felt warm around him. He settled his head upon the pillow, then pulled the quilt toward his shoulders. Outside, snow continued falling quietly. No village sounds reached the room. No footsteps disturbed the hallway. The Olden had completely settled. The traveler listened to his breathing. Slowly, his thoughts became less important. The journey felt very far away now. The snowy road seemed like another world. The old library felt like a memory. Even the village bell seemed distant. Only warmth remained around him, and the gentle darkness of winter. He closed his eyes without effort. There was nothing left to consider, nothing waiting beyond this quiet room. The night could continue without him. The inn would remain safely awake. The traveler could finally let go. His breathing became slower. His body became heavier against the mattress. The fireplace continued glowing nearby. Snow whispered softly beyond the curtains, and the quiet winter night moved onward, toward the deepest hour of sleep. The deepest hour of night had arrived. The Olden rested beneath darkness. Snow continued falling beyond the windows. Inside, everything had become completely still. The traveler remained beneath his warm blankets. His eyes were gently closed now. His breathing moved slowly and evenly. The fireplace had grown quieter. Only a few embers remained glowing. Their soft light touched the wooden walls. A final flame moved between them. Then it settled beneath the glowing ash. The room became darker than before, yet there was still enough warmth. The traveler felt comfortable beneath his quilt. His hands rested loosely beside him. His shoulders had completely relaxed. There was nothing more to accomplish tonight. Nothing needed his attention anymore. The Olden remained peacefully quiet. Every room was resting now. Every hallway stood empty and still. The wooden floors had stopped making sounds. Even the distant village seemed asleep. The traveler listened to his breathing. Each breath came naturally and slowly. There was no need to change anything. He simply allowed himself to rest. The remaining warmth surrounded him gently. His thoughts became softer with every breath. The night seemed to move without time. Outside, snow covered the sleeping village. Inside, the traveler drifted deeper. The final embers slowly faded. Darkness settled softly around the room, and everything felt peaceful. Behind the curtains, winter continued quietly. Snowflakes drifted through the darkness. They crossed the silent village rooftops. They settled upon fences and garden walls. They covered every narrow country road. The old church stood beneath white snow. Its bell tower disappeared into darkness. The village square remained completely empty. No footsteps disturbed the fresh snowfall. No lanterns moved along the road. Every cottage seemed safely asleep. The bakery remained closed until morning. The small shops stood quietly together. The stone fountain rested beneath ice. Snow softened every familiar shape. Even the old trees looked peaceful. Their branches carried thick layers of snow. The cold world outside had become still, yet the inn remained warm inside. Behind its thick stone walls, a gentle warmth continued through the rooms. The traveler did not need to see outside. He already knew the winter night. He could almost imagine the snowfall. Each flake arrived without any hurry. Each one settled exactly where needed. Nothing demanded attention from him. Nothing needed to be understood. The night simply continued around him, quietly, patiently, peacefully, and the traveler remained comfortably asleep. The old country inn was completely asleep. Downstairs, the dining room stood empty. The wooden tables waited beneath darkness. The chairs rested exactly where guests left them. The kitchen had become silent. The copper pans hung quietly overhead. The last dishes had already been washed. The common room held no voices. The fireplace had almost completely faded. The old clock continued measuring time. Its gentle ticking crossed the darkness. Upstairs, the hallway remained undisturbed. Every bedroom door stayed quietly closed. Behind each door, travelers were resting. Some dreamed of distant places. Others simply enjoyed deep, peaceful sleep. The innkeeper had retired hours earlier. His lantern rested beside the stairs. The heavy entrance door remained securely locked. The winter wind could not enter. The old walls protected everyone inside. The building seemed to breathe quietly, which settled softly beneath the roof. A tiny sound came and disappeared. Then silence returned once again. Nothing disturbed the peaceful inn. Nothing interrupted the sleeping village. Everything had found its quiet place, and the night continued gently onward. The traveler remained completely comfortable. His breathing had become slow and gentle. His body felt heavy beneath the blankets. The pillow supported his head softly. The room required nothing from him. There was nowhere he needed to go. There was nothing he needed to remember. The journey had finally come to rest. The road was far behind him. The old village was sleeping outside. The country sheltered him quietly. He listened to his peaceful breathing. A slow breath came naturally. Then another followed without effort. His thoughts began drifting farther away, like snowflakes crossing the dark sky. They appeared briefly, then disappeared into the night. He did not need to follow them. He did not need to hold them. They could simply drift away. His breathing became softer again. His body sank deeper into warmth. His hands remained completely relaxed. His face felt peaceful and still. The room became quieter with every moment. The darkness felt gentle around him. Nothing needed to happen anymore. The story itself was becoming distant. The old country remained safely around him. Snow continued falling beyond the walls. The night remained long and peaceful, and sleep was already very close. There was no need to hurry. Sleep could arrive naturally, slowly, quietly, gently, whenever it wished. The winter night is peaceful now. The old country is sleeping. The snowy village rests beneath darkness. The countryside is quiet and still, and you can rest here too. There is nothing more to do tonight, nothing more to solve, nothing more to remember. Let the day remain far behind. Tomorrow can wait until tomorrow. For now, there is only this moment. A warm bed beneath you, a quiet room around you, and peaceful winter darkness outside. Take one slow breath in and gently breathe out. Allow your body to become heavier. Let your thoughts become softer. Let every remaining worry drift away. There is no need to follow anything. Simply remain here, warm, safe, comfortable, and completely at rest. Imagine snow falling beyond the curtains. Imagine the quiet village sleeping. Imagine the old and resting peacefully. Everything is calm now. Everything is quiet now. You have nowhere else to be. You have nothing else to do. Just rest and let the night continue. Your breathing can remain slow. Your body can remain completely relaxed. Your thoughts can slowly fade away. The winter night will carry them gently. The old country will remain peaceful. The snow will continue falling softly, and you can simply sleep. So close your eyes. Take one final gentle breath and slowly let it go. Good night. Good night, dear traveler. May your sleep be deep and peaceful. May the winter night hold you gently. May your dreams remain soft and quiet. And when morning eventually arrives, you can meet it peacefully. But for now, there is only sleep, only warmth, only quiet, only rest. Good night, and sleep peaceful.